a faint melody drifts from another room, soft enough that at first it seems to be part of the evening itself. For a moment, it is only sound. Then, without warning and without effort, the melody seems to open a small doorway. A kitchen from many years ago returns. There is warm light on a table, rain against a window, and the quiet presence of people who once stood nearby. The memory does not arrive as a complete film. It comes in fragments, a color, a feeling. The shape of a cup, the sense that the room was safe, and yet these fragments belong together so naturally that the past feels close again. Memory often works in this gentle way. It is not a collection of perfect pictures waiting unchanged in the mind. It is an ongoing process, quietly active whenever the brain notices, interprets, connects, and later rebuilds an experience. Even now, as the melody fades, the present mood may soften the old scene, or a detail from another evening may quietly join it. The memory remains meaningful, but it is alive rather than fixed. Before anything can be remembered, something must first be noticed. The world offers far more information than the mind could possibly keep. Light falls across walls. Fabric touches the skin. A clock makes a small sound. The air carries traces of wood, soap, rain, or food. Most of this passes through awareness only briefly. The senses receive it, and for a very short time, faint traces remain. A sound seems to linger just after it ends. An image seems to remain for a moment after the eyes move away. These brief impressions are often called sensory memory, though they are less like stored possessions and more like the last ripple left by a passing moment. Attention helps decide which ripples may continue. When something matters, surprises us gently, or connects with what we already know, the mind gives it a little more space. A familiar voice in a crowded room may become clear, while other sounds fade. The scent of bread may become noticeable because it resembles a place from childhood. A sentence in a book may remain because it expresses something we have felt but never quite named. Attention does not guarantee that something will be remembered, but it gives experience a better chance to take shape. This shaping begins as the brain combines different kinds of information. A single moment may include color, sound, movement, location, emotion, and meaning. These elements are processed across different networks rather than placed together in one tiny chamber. The brain does not appear to keep an entire experience in one location as though it were a sealed object. Remembering later involves bringing parts of the experience into relationship again. The sound of the melody, the warmth of the kitchen, and the feeling of belonging may depend on partly different patterns of activity. Yet they can be reunited into one familiar scene. One region especially important in forming many new memories is the hippocampus, a curved structure deep within the brain. It does not hold every detail by itself. Instead, it is part of a system that helps connect the pieces of an experience, especially its people, places, sequence, and context. When an ordinary evening unfolds, the hippocampus helps the brain register that these details happen together. Over time, parts of the memory may become supported more broadly across the cortex. Scientists continue to study exactly how this unfolds, but the larger picture is clear. Memory is created through cooperation among many regions. Remembering is also shaped by what the mind already knows. When you enter a familiar room, you do not examine every object as though seeing it for the first time. previous experience provides a quiet framework. You expect the door to open in a certain direction and the lamp to be near its usual place. New details settle into this understanding. If the lamp has been moved, that difference may stand out. If everything is unchanged, the visit may blend with many similar visits and leave only a general impression. Meaning matters because the brain is not merely collecting details. It is continually relating each moment to what came before. A new fact connected to a familiar idea is often easier to retain than an isolated fact with no clear home. A path through a garden may remain because it led to a peaceful view. The connections give the experience structure. Yet even an attended and meaningful moment is not copied exactly. Perception itself is already an interpretation. The eyes receive patterns of light, but the brain recognizes a chair, a doorway, or the feeling carried in a voice. It fills small gaps using expectation and context. Usually this happens so smoothly that we never notice. Memory begins with this interpreted version of experience, not with a flawless duplicate of the outside world. Later, when the moment is recalled, the mind reconstructs it from what remains. Some details return clearly. Others are suggested by knowledge, habit, and the present situation. This does not make memory useless or unreal. Often, what matters most is carried forward. The meaning of a conversation, the familiarity of a place, the feeling associated with a person, or the expectation that a certain path leads home. So the memory awakened by the melody may not contain every sound that was once in the room. It may not preserve the exact pattern of rain or the precise shade of evening light, but it holds something quieter and more enduring, a relationship among details, a sense of where you were, and the emotional shape of the moment. The brain is kept enough to rebuild a gentle version of the past, not as a recording, but as a living pattern that can meet the present and briefly glow again. A few moments after an experience begins, the mind faces a quiet question. What should remain present for a little longer, and what can be allowed to pass away? Most of what reaches the senses disappears almost at once. The gentle hum of a room, the pressure of clothing against the skin, the changing shapes of shadows, and the many small sounds outside the window usually leave no lasting trace, yet some pieces are held briefly in awareness, just long enough to be considered, understood, or connected with something else. This temporary mental space is often called working memory. It is the part of memory that allows a thought to remain available while the mind is using it. When someone quietly reads a sentence, the beginning must still be present by the time the eyes reach the end. When a person walks into another room while thinking about a small task, the intention is carried for a few moments. When a familiar tune unfolds, the notes that have just passed are held beside the note being heard now, allowing the melody to feel continuous rather than like a series of unrelated sounds. Working memory is not a large open space. It is more like a small area of lamplight, able to illuminate only a few things clearly at one time. Earlier descriptions sometimes suggested that people could hold a fixed number of separate items in mind, but modern research presents a more flexible picture. Capacity depends on what the information is, how familiar it feels, how it is organized, and how much attention is available. A meaningful phrase may be easier to hold than a random sequence because its parts already belong together. Imagine hearing the words quiet garden path. They can be understood almost as a single idea. The mind does not need to treat every letter or every sound as a separate object. Familiar knowledge gathers the words into a larger pattern. This process is sometimes called chunking, though it happens naturally in everyday life without deliberate effort. A group of details becomes one meaningful whole, leaving more room for the mind to continue. Working memory is closely connected with attention. Whatever receives attention is more likely to remain inside this small circle of awareness. But attention can move. A distant sound may interrupt a thought. A new idea may replace an earlier one. A person may begin walking toward the kitchen and then pause, wondering why they came. Nothing unusual has happened. The original intention may simply have faded when attention was drawn elsewhere. This brief forgetting can feel strange because the thought existed only moments before. Yet thoughts in working memory are delicate. Unless they are repeated, connected with meaning, or transferred into a more lasting form, they may disappear quickly. The mind does not preserve every passing attention because it would be filled with information that is no longer useful. The temporary nature of working memory allows awareness to keep moving with the present. Working memory is not one single container. Researchers often describe it as a collection of interacting processes. Some help maintain sounds and words for a short time. Others help hold shapes, positions, and visual arrangements. Another system helps direct attention, deciding which information should be emphasized and which can wait. These descriptions are useful models rather than tiny compartments that can be seen as separate boxes inside the brain. The actual activity involves widely connected networks working together. The sound-related side of working memory can be noticed when words seem to echo silently for a moment after they are heard. A name may be repeated internally until there is a chance to use it. A line from a song may circle softly through the mind. This does not mean that the sound is stored as a perfect recording. Instead, patterns of activity briefly preserve enough of its structure for the mind to recognize or use it. Visual working memory has its own quiet role. Looking away from a table, a person may still have a rough sense of where the cup is standing. While arranging flowers, the mind can hold an idea of the space before moving the next stem. During an evening walk, the shape of a turn in the path may remain present while attention shifts toward the trees ahead. Only a limited amount of visual detail is held clearly, while the rest becomes a general impression. This limitation is not a flaw. It gives thought a manageable scale. The world contains far too much detail to be handled all at once. By selecting only a small part of experience, working memory helps the brain compare, plan, understand, and choose. It supports conversation by holding the meaning of what has just been said. It supports reading by connecting one phrase with the next. It supports simple decisions by keeping a few possibilities available until one feels appropriate. The contents of working memory can also be shaped by what is already stored in long-term memory. A skilled musician looking at a familiar pattern of notes may perceive an organized phrase where a beginner sees many separate symbols. Someone who often walks through the same neighborhood can hold a route in mind with little effort because its structure is already well known. Experience allows more information to be handled as meaningful groups rather than isolated pieces. In this way, temporary and lasting memory are always in conversation. Working memory brings a small amount of the present into awareness, while long-term knowledge helps interpret it. At the same time, what is held in awareness may become part of a more enduring memory, especially when it receives attention, carries meaning, or connects with something already familiar. Still, much of what passes through working memory will never become a lasting recollection. The exact wording of an ordinary sentence may fade while its meaning remains. The precise arrangement of objects in a room may disappear while the sense of comfort stays. The mind often preserves what is useful, meaningful, or connected, while allowing unnecessary detail to dissolve. For a few quiet seconds, working memory holds the present steady enough to be understood. Then it releases one thought and makes room for another. A sound becomes a meaning. A sentence becomes an idea. An intention guides a small action and then is no longer needed. The light of awareness moves onward, carrying only a little at a time, while the larger world continues softly around it. Some experiences remain only for a few breaths, while others settle into the mind and return days, years, or even decades later. The difference is not decided in a single instant. A memory usually becomes more lasting through a gradual series of changes, beginning while the experience is still unfolding and continuing long after attention has moved elsewhere. Consider an ordinary evening in which someone sits near an open window, listening to light rain touch the leaves outside. A book rests nearby. A lamp casts a familiar circle of warmth across the room. At the time, none of these details seem especially important, yet the evening may later be remembered with surprising tenderness. The sound of rain, the shape of the light, and the quiet feeling of having nowhere else to be may become linked into a memory that returns whenever a similar night arrives. For an experience to become more durable, the brain must first encode it. Encoding is the process through which perception is transformed into patterns that memory systems can use. It is not the same as making a copy. The brain selects, interprets, and organizes what is happening. Some details are emphasized. Others remain vague. The meaning of the moment, its emotional tone, and its connection with earlier knowledge all influence what is encoded. Attention plays an important role, but attention alone is not enough. A person may stare directly at something without forming a strong memory of it, if the experience has little meaning or if the mind is occupied elsewhere. By contrast, a quiet moment may remain clearly because it fits into an existing pattern of understanding. A new place can be remembered by its resemblance to somewhere familiar. A new voice may become memorable because its rhythm recalls another voice heard long ago. Meaning gives the brain more ways to approach an experience later. A word understood only as a sound has few connections. The same word, once linked with an image, an idea, a feeling, and a personal experience, becomes part of a wider network. Each connection can serve as a possible path back toward the memory. This is one reason that ordinary events can sometimes remain more vividly than expected. The event may have quietly touched many parts of a person's life at once. A particular meal may be connected with a season, a room, a family custom, and a feeling of rest after a long day. The memory is supported not by one detail alone, but by the relationships among them. Novelty can also deepen encoding. The brain tends to notice when something differs from what was expected. A garden visited every evening may blend into one general memory, but the first appearance of a pale flower in a familiar corner may stand out. The change does not need to be dramatic. Even a small difference can invite closer attention and create a distinct pattern. Familiarity works in another way. Repeated experiences often become easier to recognize and understand. A path walked many times gradually becomes known without effort. The turn beside the old tree, the slight rise in the ground, and the sound of water beyond the hedge form a stable mental map. Individual walks may emerge, but the route itself becomes deeply familiar. Repetition can strengthen memory, though not always by preserving every occurrence separately. When events are very similar, the mind often extracts what they share. Many evenings spent in the same chair may become a general memory of that room, rather than a clear record of each evening. The brain learns the pattern, where the window is, how the room sounds at nights, and what usually happens there. This ability to gather repeated experiences into general knowledge is useful. It allows the mind to predict and understand without rebuilding everything from the beginning. A familiar routine becomes easy because earlier experiences have shaped expectations. The mind knows what usually comes next. At the same time, a single event can remain distinct when it carries unusual meaning. Perhaps one evening, while the rain is falling, a long-awaited letter is read beside the window. The room is the same, but the moment is different. The familiar setting provides a background, while the new event gives the evening its individual shape. Once an experience has been encoded, it is not instantly permanent. New memories are often fragile. They can be influenced by distraction, by later experiences, and by the simple passage of time. Gradually, some become more stable through a process known as consolidation. Consolidation does not happen in one place or at one speed. Some changes begin within minutes or hours, as connections among neurons are altered. Other forms of reorganization continue across longer periods, as memories become integrated with wider networks of knowledge. The hippocampus often helps coordinate this early stage for many memories of events and places, while different aspects of the experience are represented across the brain. The word storage can make memory sound motionless, as though an experience were placed somewhere and left untouched. In reality, lasting memory depends on patterns of connection that remain capable of change. The memory of the rainy evening may become linked over time with later rains, later rooms, and later feelings of calm. Its place within the mind continues to develop. Not every detail strengthens equally. The exact number of raindrops on the window is not preserved. The wording of a passing thought may disappear. What remains may be the arrangement of the room, the soft rhythm outside, and the feeling that the evening moves slowly. Memory tends to hold patterns, meanings, and selected details rather than complete records. There is no single boundary where short-term memory suddenly becomes long-term memory. The transition is gradual and depends on many interacting processes. Some information fades before a lasting pattern forms. Some is retained for a day and then becomes difficult to retrieve. Some is strengthened by returning attention, repeated experience, emotion, or later rest. Even memories that last are not equally accessible at every moment. A detail may seem absent until a fitting cue appears. The sound of rain against leaves may awaken the old room more easily than a direct attempt to remember it. Retrieval depends not only on whether a memory was formed, but also on whether the present offers a path that resembles the way it was originally organized, and so an evening becomes part of the past quietly. No signal announces that it has been kept. The lamp is turned off. The rain moves farther away. The book is closed, and attention passes into other moments. Yet some part of the experience has begun to settle, supported by meaning, connection, and the slow changing of the brain. Much later, another window may be open on another rainy night. A similar rhythm touches the leaves. Before any deliberate search begins, the earlier evening returns, not complete, not unchanged, but present enough to be felt. What was once a passing moment has become part of the mind's continuing landscape. A memory may feel like one thing when it returns. Yet beneath that sense of wholeness, many kinds of knowledge are quietly working together. Remembering a familiar morning might involve the layout of a room, the meaning of a conversation, the sound of a kettle, the feel of a practiced movement, and the knowledge that the day belonged to a certain season. These parts are not identical, and they are not all supported in exactly the same way. Some memories are tied to particular moments. They carry a sense of having happened somewhere, at some time, to the person remembering. A walk taken on the first cool evening of autumn, a conversation beside a garden wall, or the discovery of a smooth stone near a stream, can all become what researchers call episodic memories. They belong to events and often include a feeling of mentally returning to the scene. Other memories are less connected to a single occasion. Knowing the meaning of a word, recognizing the shape of a continent, or understanding that winter follows autumn does not usually require remembering the exact moment when the knowledge was first learned. This broader store of facts, concepts, and meanings is often called semantic memory. The two are different, but they are deeply connected. A personal event can gradually contribute to general knowledge. A child may first learn what rain is through many separate experiences. Hearing it on a roof, seeing droplets gather on leaves, noticing the cool air that follows. Over time, those individual moments help form a more general understanding. The knowledge of rain remains even when the original experiences can no longer be recalled clearly. The reverse can also happen. General knowledge helps shape personal memory. If someone remembers visiting a seaside town in late spring, the memory may draw on what is already known about harbors, salt air, gulls, and the pale evening light of that season. Some of these details may belong to the specific visit. Others may come from the wider knowledge that gives the scene its coherence. This is one reason memory can feel both precise and incomplete. A person may be certain that a conversation took place in a small cafe while being unable to recall the exact words. The event itself remains, along with its meaning and setting, while many details have faded. Semantic knowledge quietly fills the background, helping the mind reconstruct what such a place was probably like. There are still other forms of memory that reveal themselves through action rather than conscious recollection. A familiar movement can often be performed without describing every step. Hands may know how to tie a simple knot, turn the pages of a well-used book without tearing them, or guide a spoon through the familiar motion of stirring. These learned skills belong broadly to procedural memory. Procedural memory grows through practice. At first, a movement may require close attention. Each part seems separate. With repetition, the sequence becomes smoother, and less conscious effort is needed. The knowledge is not necessarily stored as a set of spoken instructions. It becomes expressed through coordinated patterns of action supported by networks that include regions involved in movement, timing, and habit. This quiet form of memory is present in many ordinary routines. A person may begin writing and find that the hand forms familiar letters before attention turns fully toward them. Someone walking a known staircase does not need to measure each step. A melody once practiced may return to the fingers even when the name of the piece takes longer to appear. These examples show why it is misleading to imagine memory as one single ability. The mind remembers events, meanings, movements, places, voices, and patterns through overlapping but partly distinct systems. A difficulty in one kind of remembering does not necessarily mean that all forms of memory have changed in the same way. The brain supports this variety by distributing different aspects of experience across many regions. Visual qualities are linked with areas involved in processing vision. Sounds are related to auditory networks. Spatial relationships involve systems that help represent location and direction. Emotional tone depends partly on regions that help evaluate significance and bodily state. The hippocampus helps bind many of these elements together for new event memories, but it is not a small container holding the entire scene. When a memory is recalled, parts of the original pattern become active again. The process is not identical to the first experience, but it can partly resemble it. Remembering a familiar song may engage auditory regions. Recalling the appearance of a path may involve visual and spatial networks. Thinking about the movement of opening a gate may quietly involve systems connected with action. The memory feels unified because the brain coordinates these reactivated elements. A voice, a room, and a feeling of late afternoon can arrive together. Even though their details depend on different networks, the unity belongs to the act of remembering, not to a single place where the whole memory has been stored unchanged. Over time, these relationships can shift. A once vivid event may lose some of its sensory detail while its meaning remains strong. A person may no longer remember the afternoon when a certain fact was learned, yet the fact itself becomes familiar and stable. A route first remembered as a sequence of careful turns may eventually become something. The body follows almost automatically. This gradual transformation is natural. Memory does not preserve every experience in the same form forever. It extracts, reorganizes, and integrates. Events contribute to knowledge. Repeated actions become skills. Familiar places become mental maps. Personal moments may slowly become part of the background understanding through which later life is interpreted. Imagine returning to a garden after many years. The exact details of the earliest visit may be uncertain. Perhaps the arrangement of the flowers has changed, or perhaps memory has blended several visits together. Yet the mind may still know where the path bends, how the gate feels in the hand, and what kind of quiet belongs to that place. The knowledge is carried in several ways at once. There may be an episodic memory of one particular evening, semantic knowledge about the plants, procedural familiarity with the gate, and a broad sense of recognition that appears before any clear detail. These forms of memory overlap gently, making the place feel known. What returns is not a single preserved object. It is a meeting of systems, each contributing something different. A location, a meaning, a practiced movement, and a feeling of familiarity gather into one present experience. And in that quiet gathering, the past becomes available again, not complete in every detail, but layered, connected, and deeply woven into the way the mind understands the world. Sometimes a memory seems to be absent until something small brings it near. A voice heard from the end of a hallway, the feel of a familiar fabric, or the first cool air of a changing season can make an old moment suddenly accessible. Nothing new has been added to the past. Instead, the present has provided a cue, a detail that helps the mind find its way back toward a pattern formed earlier. Retrieving a memory is not always like opening a door that was clearly marked. Often, it is more like finding a path whose entrance has become hidden beneath soft grass. The path may still exist, but the mind needs the right angle, sound, place, or idea to notice where it begins. This is why a fact that seems impossible to recall in one setting may return easily in another. A person may struggle to remember the name of a plant while sitting indoors, then recognize it immediately when seeing the same leaves beside a garden path. The knowledge was not necessarily gone. The surroundings simply offered more of the features connected with the original learning. Memory cues can be external, such as a room, a melody, a scent, or an object. They can also be internal, such as a thought, a mood, or another memory. One idea often leads quietly to the next. Remembering a summer visit may bring to mind a certain house, which then brings back the sound of a gate, which awakens the memory of someone waiting nearby. Retrieval often unfolds as a chain of associations rather than a single direct search. Some cues are especially effective because they were present when the memory first formed. This idea is sometimes described as encoding specificity. The way an experience is encoded influences the kinds of cues that will later help retrieve it. If a word was learned in connection with a river, the image of moving water may offer a better path back than an unrelated image, even if both are equally familiar. Context can therefore shape remembering. The physical environment, the sounds nearby, the time of day, and the surrounding activity may all become part of the memory structure. Returning to a familiar place can bring back details that seemed unavailable elsewhere. An old reading chair may awaken the plot of a book once read there. A certain corner of a park may restore the memory of a conversation that had not been considered for years. The context does not act as a perfect key. Memories can still be recalled in different places, and people are not bound to the original setting. But matching features can make retrieval easier because they reactivate parts of the earlier pattern. Internal states may also serve as cues. A calm mood can make some calm memories easier to access, while a thoughtful mood may bring forward moments with a similar tone. Researchers use the phrase state-dependent memory for some situations in which recall is helped when internal conditions resemble those present during learning. These effects are usually subtle in everyday life, and they do not mean that every memory is locked inside a particular feeling. They simply show that remembering is influenced by the whole condition of the mind and body, not only by the information itself. Recognition is one of the gentlest forms of retrieval. It occurs when something feels known after it appears again. A face in a crowd may seem familiar before the name returns. A line in a book may be recognized even though it could not have been produced from memory moments earlier. The presence of the item provides many cues at once, making recognition generally easier than active recall. Recall asks the mind to generate information with fewer supports. Remembering the name of a distant town without seeing it is more demanding than recognizing the name on a page. The difference explains a common experience. A person may feel certain that they know an answer as soon as it is shown, even though they could not bring it to mind beforehand. This feeling can sometimes create an illusion of stronger memory than is actually present. Something may look familiar because it has been encountered before, but familiarity alone does not always reveal where or when the encounter happened. A phrase may seem known without any clear memory of who said it. A melody may feel old and close, while its source remains uncertain. Researchers sometimes describe this as a difference between familiarity and recollection. Familiarity is the quiet sense that something has been encountered before. Recollection includes the return of details about the original event, such as the place, time, or surrounding circumstances. The two often work together, but they can also appear separately. This is why a person may recognize an object in an antique shop without remembering that a similar one once stood in a relative's home. The shape feels known, but the scene connected with it has not yet returned. Later, perhaps after noticing a worn wooden handle or a particular shade of paint, the fuller memory may emerge. At other times, the feeling of familiarity remains without a source. This is a normal feature of memory. The brain may preserve the trace that something has been encountered while losing the connections that identify the occasion. Source memory. The ability to remember where information came from is partly distinct from remembering the information itself. A story may be remembered while its teller is forgotten. A fact may remain while the book in which it appeared fades from memory. A person may later wonder whether an idea came from a conversation, a dream, or a page read long ago. The content has survived more strongly than its origin. These source confusions are not signs that memory is careless. They reflect the way different aspects of an experience can weaken at different rates. Meaning may remain stable while context becomes less precise. Familiarity may endure after time and place have softened. Retrieval itself can also influence what will be remembered later. When a memory is brought to mind, its pathways become active again. This often makes the memory easier to access in the future, especially if the retrieval is clear and connected with useful cues. But each act of remembering also occurs in a new context. The present can become linked with the old memory, adding another layer to the way it will later return. An old song heard in a new room may now belong to both times. Years later, the melody may awaken not only the earliest memory, but also the evening when it was heard again. Memories gather new associations as they travel through life. For this reason, a cue does not always lead to one single event. The scent of wet earth may bring several gardens together. A familiar phrase may belong to more than one voice. The mind selects among overlapping patterns, sometimes retrieving a specific scene and sometimes producing only a broad sense of knowing. A memory that cannot be reached at one moment may become available later when a better cue appears. The failure to recall is not proof that the past has vanished, just as later remembering does not prove that every original detail remained intact. Accessibility changes with attention, context, association, and time. And so the mind moves through a world filled with quiet reminders. A doorway, a rhythm, a patch of evening light, or the shape of a familiar tree may offer a route into the past. The cue does not contain the memory. It simply touches part of the pattern. And from that small beginning, the rest may slowly gather. After the day has quieted and the outside world asks less of attention, the brain does not simply become inactive. During sleep, patterns of activity continue to move through many regions, and some of the experiences gathered during waking hours begin to change. Recent memories may be strengthened, reorganized, connected with older knowledge, or allowed to fade. This is one reason sleep has such an important relationship with memory, though the process is more subtle than placing the events of the day into permanent storage. Imagine an evening after visiting a place for the first time. There were unfamiliar streets, a small bridge over slow water, the sound of footsteps beneath an archway, and several turns that required careful attention. Soon afterward, the route may feel uncertain. Some details are clear, while others remain loosely connected. After a night of sleep, the general shape of the journey may become easier to remember, even if no conscious effort was made to review it. Researchers have found strong evidence that sleep supports the consolidation of many kinds of memory. The exact effects depend on the type of information, the stage of sleep, the timing, and many other conditions. Sleep does not preserve every experience equally, and it does not guarantee perfect recall. It appears instead to create conditions in which recent patterns can be stabilized and gradually integrated with what the brain already knows. During waking hours, the hippocampus is especially involved in rapidly forming many new memories of events, places, and relationships. The cortex, spread across the outer layers of the brain, holds broader networks of knowledge built over longer periods. One influential scientific account suggests that during rest and sleep, patterns associated with recent experiences are sometimes reactivated, helping the hippocampus and cortex coordinate. This reactivation is sometimes described as replay. In studies of animals and humans, researchers have observed patterns during sleep that resemble patterns active during earlier learning. Replay is not thought to be a complete private film of the day. It may occur in compressed, altered, or selective forms. The brain seems to revisit relationships within an experience rather than reproduce every detail exactly as it happened. A path explored during the afternoon, for example, may be represented during sleep through patterns linked with its turns and locations. These patterns may help strengthen the connections that make the route understandable. The next day, the person may not remember every doorway passed along the way, but the structure of the journey can feel more settled. Different stages of sleep appear to contribute in different ways. Deep, non-rapid eye movement. Sleep is associated with slow waves of electrical activity across the cortex. Within this quiet rhythm, faster bursts known as sleep spindles appear for brief periods. Activity from the hippocampus may also occur in rapid events called sharp wave ripples. Scientists are still studying precisely how these rhythms work together, but evidence suggests that the coordination is important for transferring and reorganizing information across memory systems. Rapid eye movement, sleep, or REM sleep, has also been linked with memory, particularly with some forms of emotional learning, skill learning, and the integration of distant associations. The boundaries are not simple. No single stage performs only one memory task, and many findings remain under investigation. A full night includes repeated cycles, each offering a different pattern of brain activity that may contribute to the gradual processing of experience. Sleep can also help memories become less dependent on their original details. When a new idea is learned, it may first be tied closely to the exact wording, page, or setting in which it appeared. With time and sleep, the central meaning may become easier to use in other situations. The memory becomes connected with wider knowledge rather than remaining attached only to one encounter. Suppose someone spends an afternoon watching the slow change of clouds before rain. At first, the experience is a collection of separate observations: the darkening horizon, the direction of the wind, the cooler air, and the first drops on dry ground. Later, these details may contribute to a broader understanding of how such weather develops. Sleep may support the process by which recent observations are integrated with earlier experiences. This does not mean the brain deliberately decides what each memory should become. Much of the work happens without awareness. The sleeping mind may strengthen certain connections because they were repeated, meaningful, or related to existing knowledge. Other details may weaken because they were incidental or poorly connected. Quiet rest while awake may offer some of the same benefits on a smaller scale. After learning something new, a period without constant stimulation can allow recently formed patterns to remain active. Studies suggest that resting quietly can sometimes support later memory, perhaps because new information has less competition and the brain has an opportunity to revisit it. The moments between activities may therefore be more active than they appear. Sitting near a window after returning from a walk, hearing only a distant breeze and the occasional movement of leaves, the mind may drift through pieces of what has just happened. A view returns briefly. A sentence from a conversation appears and disappears. These small returns may help recent experiences settle into a more organized form. Memory can be disrupted when many similar experiences arrive close together. A new route may interfere with an earlier route. A second set of instructions may blur the first. Sleep and quiet rest reduce some of this immediate competition. They create a period in which the brain receives less new sensory information and can continue processing what is already present. The relationship between sleep and memory is not only about keeping more details. Sleep may also help select, simplify, and transform. Some studies suggest that the brain can preserve the central meaning of an experience while allowing less important features to fade. Other research shows that details can remain strong when they are relevant. The outcome depends on what was learned and how the memory will be used. Dreams sometimes contain pieces of recent life, but dreaming is not a direct display of consolidation. A dream may combine places, people, and ideas in unusual ways, and many memory processes occur without becoming part of any remembered dream. The connection between dreams and memory remains an area of active research, with much still unknown. What is well established is that sleep supports learning and memory across many situations. It helps recently formed experiences become more stable, supports practice skills, and contributes to the integration of new knowledge. Yet its work is selective and creative rather than mechanical. By morning, the events of the previous day may already feel slightly different. A difficult route may seem more familiar. A movement practiced slowly may flow with less effort. A complicated idea may appear more coherent, even though no single moment of understanding can be identified. The night has not preserved the day exactly. It has allowed the brain to continue shaping it. Some details have strengthened. Others have blended into larger patterns. the newest experiences have begun to find relationships with older ones, joining the wide and changing network through which the past becomes useful to the present. And while the room remained dark and still, memory continued its quiet work. Forgetting is often described as though it were a failure, a small disappearance where something useful should have remained. Yet the ability to let details fade is one of the ways memory stays flexible. A mind that kept every sound, every glance, every repeated object, and every passing thought with equal strength would have difficulty finding what mattered. Remembering depends not only on what is preserved, but also on what is allowed to become quiet. Think of a long walk through a familiar neighborhood. Along the way, there may be hundreds of small impressions, the exact position of each fallen leaf, the order of the windows passed, the separate footsteps heard in the distance, and every change in the shape of the clouds. By the next day, most of these details are no longer available. What remains may be the coolness of the air, the general route, and the sight of the first yellow leaves of the season. The fading of detail does not mean the walk was poorly experienced. The brain has retained a useful outline while releasing information that was unlikely to be needed again. In this sense, forgetting is not simply the opposite of memory. It is part of the same process of selection, organization, and change. Some memories weaken because the patterns supporting them become less accessible over time. Earlier theories sometimes describe this as simple decay, suggesting that unused memories gradually dissolve. Time does matter, but it is rarely acting alone. During the hours and years after an event, many new experiences arrive. Similar information overlaps. Attention shifts. The cues that once led easily toward the memory may no longer be present. A person may once have known the exact arrangement of a guest room visited during a short holiday. Years later, the room may survive only as a broad feeling of pale curtains and early morning light. The missing details may have faded because they were rarely revisited, while other rooms and other mornings created newer patterns. Interference is one important part of forgetting. Memories can compete when they resemble one another. A new address may make an earlier address harder to recall. The name of a recently visited village may appear when the mind is searching for the name of another. Several similar evenings may blend until it is difficult to know which conversation happened on which day. This competition can move in both directions. Older knowledge can make it harder to retain something new, especially when an earlier habit is strong. Newer learning can also make older information more difficult to retrieve. Neither process necessarily erases the memory completely. The memories may simply be competing for the same cue. Imagine placing a familiar cup in a different cupboard. For several mornings, the hand may move toward the old location before remembering the new one. The previous pattern is still active. Later, after the new arrangement has become familiar, the earlier location may be harder to picture. Everyday memory is continually adjusting to what is most useful now. Retrieval itself can also shape forgetting. When one memory is repeatedly selected, related memories that are not chosen may become less accessible. This process is sometimes called retrieval. induced forgetting. It may help reduce competition, allowing the mind to reach the needed information more efficiently. Suppose several paths lead to the same woodland. If one route is walked often, its turns become easy to remember. Nearby paths that were visited only once may become less distinct. Their traces may not be entirely gone, but the well-practiced route now comes forward more quickly and strongly. Forgetting can therefore make knowledge easier to use. It softens competing details and helps general patterns emerge. After many meals in the same room, a person may not remember where every plate was placed on every evening. Instead, the mind carries a stable understanding of the room, the usual routine, and the feeling of gathering there. This movement from detail toward general meaning is one of memory's quiet transformations. Individual events often lose some of their edges while contributing to wider knowledge. The precise afternoon when a new word was learned may disappear, even though the word becomes part of ordinary understanding. The first time a familiar route was followed may be forgotten, while knowledge of the route remains. Sometimes forgetting is really a difficulty in access, rather than a complete loss. A name may seem unreachable, hovering just beyond awareness. Hours later, when attention has moved elsewhere, it returns on its own. The memory was not available when deliberately searched for, but another cue or a shift in mental context allowed it to appear. This familiar experience shows that memory cannot always be judged by what can be recalled at one particular moment. Accessibility changes. Fatigue, distraction, surroundings, and competing thoughts can all influence which path the mind follows. A memory that feels absent today may return unexpectedly in another season, another room, or during an unrelated conversation. Yet it is also important not to imagine that every forgotten experience remains perfectly preserved somewhere waiting for the correct key. Some information truly weakens. Details can be lost, altered, or blended beyond recovery. The brain does not maintain a complete hidden copy of every moment. What remains depends on how strongly the experience was encoded, how often it was revisited, and how it became connected with later knowledge. This loss is usually gentle and ordinary. The exact pattern on a tablecloth fades. The wording of a casual conversation becomes uncertain. The order of events during an uneventful afternoon grows soft. The mind keeps enough to move through life without being crowded by every earlier version of the present. Forgetting also creates room for change. A rule that was once useful may need to be replaced. A route may be altered. A familiar routine may slowly take a new form. The mind benefits from being able to weaken outdated expectations so that newer experience can guide behavior. In this way, memory is always balancing stability with flexibility. Too little stability, and experience would not accumulate into knowledge. Too little flexibility, and the past would interfere with every new situation. Forgetting helps maintain the balance, reducing noise while preserving patterns that continue to matter. By evening, much of an ordinary day has already begun to fade. The exact sequence of small actions becomes less clear. Passing sounds disappear. Many sentences lose their precise form. What remains may be simpler: the sense of a task completed, a kind exchange, the color of the sky before sunset, or the quiet relief of returning home. The day has not vanished. It has been reduced, reorganized, and gently shaped. Some parts will strengthen. Some will return only when a fitting cue appears. Others will dissolve into the background from which general knowledge and familiar feelings slowly grow, and so forgetting moves beside remembering. Not as its enemy, but as its quiet companion. It clears unnecessary detail, softens old competition, and allows the mind to carry the past without carrying every moment at once. Each time a memory returns, it arrives in the present. It may have begun years ago, in another room and under another sky. But remembering happens now, within the thoughts, feelings, and surroundings of the current moment. Because of this, recall is not simply the opening of an untouched record. It is an act of reconstruction, and the reconstructed memory can sometimes become slightly changed before it settles again. Imagine remembering a quiet afternoon beside a lake. The water was still, reeds moved near the shore, and someone nearby was reading beneath a tree. The scene may feel complete when it appears in the mind, yet only some parts may come directly from the original experience. The silver color of the water may be clear, while the exact shape of the clouds is uncertain. The tree may seem taller now, because it has become part of the memory's peaceful atmosphere. A bird heard on another visit may quietly enter the scene. These changes are usually small and unnoticed. They do not mean that the mind is deliberately inventing the past. Memory has always depended on selected traces, general knowledge, and present cues. When those pieces are gathered again, the brain creates the most coherent version available. The process begins with retrieval. A cue activates part of an earlier pattern, and related details gradually return. For a time, the memory becomes flexible. Researchers often use the word reconsolidation to describe processes through which a retrieved memory is stabilized again. Evidence suggests that some memories can be modified during this period, although exactly when and how this happens depends on many conditions and remains an active area of study. A recalled memory may become connected with new information. If someone revisits the lakeside years later and discovers that the reading tree was a willow rather than an alder, that knowledge may join future recollections. The next time the afternoon returns, the tree may appear more clearly as a willow, even though the species was not noticed during the original visit. The memory has not been replaced in a simple, complete way. Different traces may coexist. There may be the early impression, the later visit, and the newer knowledge about the tree. But when the event is reconstructed, the mind may draw from all of them. Conversation can also influence memory. When several people remember the same peaceful gathering, each may contribute a different detail. One recalls the music playing quietly. Another remembers flowers near the window. Someone else is certain that rain began before everyone left. As the story is told again over the years, these details may become part of a shared account. This does not necessarily make the account false. Many of its central features may be reliable. The gathering occurred, certain people were present, and the evening carried a particular meaning, yet the boundaries between personal recollection, later information, and repeated storytelling can soften. The mind naturally seeks coherence. When parts are missing, it uses expectations and familiar patterns to form a continuous scene. If a remembered afternoon took place in early autumn, the mind may supply golden leaves because they fit the season. Even if the trees were still green, the completed image feels natural because it agrees with general knowledge. This constructive ability is essential. Without it, remembering would consist of scattered sensations without order. The brain must connect details, infer relationships, and place events within a meaningful sequence. Reconstruction allows a few remaining traces to become an understandable experience. The same ability also explains why confidence and accuracy are not always identical. A memory may feel clear because its pieces fit together smoothly, not because every piece is exact. Repetition can increase familiarity, and familiarity can make a version of an event feel increasingly certain. The feeling of certainty is real, but it is not a perfect measure of detail. Ordinary false memories can emerge from these processes. The phrase false memory may sound dramatic, but many examples are quiet and harmless. A person may remember placing a blue vase on a shelf when it was actually green. They may believe a sentence appeared in a book when it came from a later conversation. They may combine two similar train journeys into one. Such errors are not evidence that memory is generally untrustworthy. Memory is often accurate enough to guide everyday life, especially for central meaning and well-established knowledge. Its errors tend to reveal the method it uses, preserving patterns, connecting related experiences, and rebuilding events rather than replaying them. Imagination shares some of the same mental resources. To imagine a future walk, the mind may combine a known path, tomorrow's expected weather, and the memory of an earlier morning. To picture a room described in a story, it may borrow the proportions of one room and the light of another. Remembering and imagining are not the same, but both involve assembling scenes from available elements. This overlap helps explain why memories can be enriched by later imagination. Repeatedly picturing how an event might have looked can make imagined details feel familiar. Over time, the source of that familiarity may become unclear. A person may remember the image without remembering that it was created later. Source awareness helps the mind distinguish between what was directly experienced, what was heard from someone else, and what was imagined. Yet source information is often more fragile than content. The image of a cottage beside a field may remain vivid while its origin becomes uncertain. Was it visited, described, seen in a painting, or imagined while reading? The scene remains, but its label has faded. Even accurate memories change in emphasis. A conversation that once seemed ordinary may later appear important because of what followed. A small choice may become the center of a story, while surrounding details recede. The event itself has not moved in time, but its place within a life has changed. Present emotion can also shape the tone of recollection. A childhood winter remembered during a peaceful evening may feel softer than it did at the time. Later understanding may bring warmth to a moment once barely noticed. Memory does not only carry the earlier self forward, it allows the current self to meet that earlier experience and interpret it anew. This is why the same memory can feel different at different stages of life. Its basic outline may remain, but its meaning develops. A room once remembered mainly for its size may later be remembered for the care with which it was kept. A routine once taken for granted may become a symbol of steadiness. The past is not rewritten without limit, but it is continually viewed through new knowledge. Each act of remembering adds another occasion to the memory's history. There's the original event, the first recollection, the story told later, the place revisited, and the quiet moment when it returns again. These layers gather without always remaining separate. And so a memory lives not only in where it began, but also in every present moment that receives it. It returns with some details clear, and others gently restored by context. It may gain a new association, lose an old edge, or take on a deeper meaning. Then it settles once more into the mind, familiar yet slightly changed, carrying both the past that formed it and the present that has remembered it again. Some moments remain vivid, not because every detail was carefully noticed, but because the experience carried a feeling. A simple afternoon may fade almost completely, while one quiet exchange, one unexpected kindness, or one moment of deep familiarity remains clear for many years. Emotion gives certain experiences a different weight, helping the brain treat them as more significant than the many neutral details surrounding them. This does not mean that emotional memories are perfect. They can feel especially strong and certain, while still changing over time. What emotion often preserves most powerfully is the importance of the event, the sense that this moment mattered. The exact wording, timing, or arrangement of the scene may soften, even while the feeling connected with it remains. Imagine arriving at a small house after a long journey. The room is ordinary. A lamp is glowing near the wall. A coat has been placed over the back of a chair, and someone quietly sets down a cup of warm tea. Years later, the precise design of the cup may be forgotten. The words spoken at the doorway may no longer be available, yet the feeling of being welcomed may return with unusual clarity. When something feels meaningful, several systems in the brain work together to influence what is remembered. The amygdala, a small group of structures deep within the brain, helps evaluate the emotional significance of events. It does not store the entire emotional memory by itself. Instead, it interacts with the hippocampus, sensory regions, attention systems, and other networks involved in learning and bodily responses. These interactions can strengthen the encoding of certain details. An emotionally important event may receive more attention while it is happening. It may also be revisited in thought afterward, giving the memory additional opportunities to become established. During later rest and sleep, emotional significance may continue to influence which parts of experience are strengthened and reorganized. The relationship is not simple. Strong feeling does not preserve every feature equally. Often, attention narrows toward what seems most important, while background details receive less processing. A person may remember the warmth in another person's voice, but not the objects on the nearby table. The central meaning remains, while the setting becomes less distinct. Even gentle emotions can shape memory in this way. Contentment may give a quiet evening a sense of completeness. Curiosity may make an unusual pattern in the clouds easier to remember. Affection may preserve the rhythm of a familiar voice. Amusement may keep a small mistake alive in family stories long after the surrounding day has disappeared. Positive, emotional memories often become part of how familiar places acquire their atmosphere. A kitchen is not experienced only as walls, furniture, and light. It may carry the remembered comfort of meals shared there. A garden path may feel peaceful because many calm walks have become associated with it. The present place is colored by the emotional traces of earlier visits. These traces are not always linked to one clear event. Sometimes, a feeling of familiarity has been built gradually through repetition. Many ordinary mornings in the same room may combine into a broad memory of steadiness. No single morning stands out, yet together they create a sense that the room belongs to a dependable part of life. Mood can also influence which memories become easier to retrieve. When the mind is peaceful, memories with a similar emotional tone may come forward more readily. A calm evening may bring back other calm evenings. Not because the mind is searching deliberately, but because overlapping patterns make certain paths easier to follow. Researchers sometimes describe this as mood-congruent memory. The effect varies and is not absolute. People can remember joyful events during difficult days and quiet events during lively ones. Still, the emotional state of the present can gently influence which parts of the past feel closest. The reverse is also true. A memory can alter the present mood. Remembering a familiar welcome may bring some of its warmth into the current moment. Hearing a voice from long ago may create a brief sense of closeness. The memory is not merely information about what happened. It can partly reactivate the emotional pattern connected with the original experience. This reactivation often includes bodily sensations. A remembered place may bring a sense of loosened shoulders or a slower breath. A familiar song may create a quiet feeling in the chest before any clear image appears. Emotion, memory, and bodily state are closely linked, and the return of one can gently awaken the others. Not every emotional memory begins with a strong feeling. Sometimes meaning grows later. An ordinary routine may become precious only after life has changed. The sound of a door opening at the same hour each evening may once have seemed unremarkable. Years later, it may represent reliability, companionship, or home. When the meaning changes, the memory may change with it. Details that once seemed unimportant can become central. A small gesture may be understood differently with greater age or experience. The present mind does not recreate the past exactly as it was understood then. It meets the event with everything learned since. Shared emotion also helps memories travel between people. Families and communities often remember events through stories repeated at gatherings. The details chosen for retelling are usually those that carry warmth, humor, pride, or tenderness. Through repetition, the story becomes part of a shared past. Even for those who were not present at the original moment, collective memory is shaped by this selection. A tradition may preserve the meaning of an event more strongly than its exact details. A meal prepared each year can carry the memory of earlier generations. A song sung at the same season can become linked with many voices in many rooms. The memory belongs partly to individuals and partly to the group that continues it. These shared memories are not fixed records either. Each retelling may emphasize a slightly different part. One person remembers who arrived first. Another remembers the weather. Another remembers the laughter near the end. Together, the versions form a larger account, held through repetition and feeling. Emotion, therefore, does more than make memories stronger. It helps organize them around significance. It tells the mind that some experiences deserve closer attention, more connection, and easier access later. Yet it does not turn memory into a flawless record. Emotional memories remain selective, reconstructive, and shaped by the present. What often lasts is not the entire day, but its emotional center. The welcome at the doorway. The ease of sitting beside someone without needing to speak. The quiet pride of learning a familiar task. The comfort of returning to a place that already knows the shape of one's routines. Around these centers, many details may fade. The date becomes uncertain. The room changes slightly in recollection. Several similar evenings blend together. Still, the meaning remains available, carried not as a complete image, but as a pattern of connection between place, person, sensation, and feeling. And when that pattern is awakened again, the past may return first as warmth rather than as words. A room feels familiar before its layout is remembered. A voice feels close before the conversation comes back. Emotion reaches across the years, gathering a few surviving details around it. And for a moment, an earlier experience becomes quietly present once more. A thin curl of citrus scent rises as an orange peel is opened on a winter evening. For a moment, it belongs only to the room, bright, clean, and faintly sweet against the cooler air. Then another place appears without being deliberately searched for. A wooden table near a frosted window, a wool coat drying by the door, and the quiet sound of someone turning pages nearby seem to gather around the scent. The details may be incomplete, yet the feeling of that earlier season arrives with remarkable ease. Smell has a particularly intimate relationship with memory. A fragrance encountered after many years can bring back an old setting before the mind has found words for it. The recognition may begin as a feeling of nearness or familiarity. Only afterward do the place, the people, and the time gradually become clearer. Odor information follows a somewhat different route through the brain from information carried by vision or hearing. Molecules in the air reach receptors high inside the nose, where they create patterns of neural activity. These signals travel to the olfactory bulb and then towards several regions involved in identifying smells, evaluating their significance, and linking them with experience. Olfactory pathways have close connections with regions involved in emotion and memory, including parts of the amygdala and areas near the hippocampal system. This arrangement may help explain why scents can awaken emotionally. Rich autobiographical memories so quickly, it would be too simple to say that smell travels directly into a single memory center, because many networks take part. Still, the closeness of these systems gives scent a distinctive place in the landscape of remembering. Smells are also difficult to describe. A color can often be named quickly, and a melody can be repeated, but a scent may remain familiar while its name stays out of reach. Someone may know that a room smells like an earlier home without being able to identify whether the source is polished wood, dried herbs, old paper, or soap, because language often arrives slowly. Scent memories can feel less organized by words than other recollections. The memory may first appear as atmosphere. A particular kind of air belongs to a certain hallway. A trace of pine belongs to winter mornings. The smell of warm dust belongs to a room first heated after months of summer. Meaning is present before a clear description forms. Odors are often learned through association. A scent encountered repeatedly in one setting becomes linked with the people, routines, and emotions found there. Lavender may come to suggest clean linen because the two were often experienced together. Beeswax may become connected with a quiet workshop. Damp stone may recall the cool entrance of an old building. The scent itself does not contain these scenes. It acts as a cue, reactivating parts of the network formed when the odor and the setting were experienced together. If the association was repeated or emotionally meaningful, the cue may remain effective for a very long time. Research suggests that odor-evoked autobiographical memories are often experienced as especially emotional and vivid, and they frequently come from earlier periods of life. The exact reasons are still being studied, One possibility is that many smells are encountered without being deliberately named or repeatedly discussed, so their associations are revisited less often and may retain a distinctive quality. Another is that the neural pathways of smell encourage strong links with emotional context, yet a scent does not restore the past perfectly. The orange peel may awaken a winter room, but the returning scene is still reconstructed. The mind may combine several similar evenings. A coat from one year may appear beside a table from another. The emotional atmosphere may be clearer than the sequence of events. Smell is not the only quiet cue capable of reaching across time. Familiar music can also bring back an earlier period with unusual speed. A few notes may restore the general texture of a year, the rooms often visited, the journeys taken, or the rhythm of everyday routines. Music unfolds through time, and memory helps the mind hear it as a pattern. Each note is understood in relation to those that came before and to those expected next. When a melody is deeply familiar, the brain anticipates its movement. Even during a pause, the next phrase may seem to hover silently in awareness. A song may become linked with a particular era simply because it was heard often during that time. Later, the melody acts as a broad contextual cue. It may not retrieve one single event. Instead, it can bring forward a collection of places, moods, and repeated activities that once surrounded it. The sound of a familiar voice can work in a similar way. Voices carry more than words. Their pitch, rhythm, pauses, and patterns of emphasis become recognizable through repeated experience. A person may identify a voice from only a short phrase, sometimes before consciously understanding what was said. This recognition depends on auditory memory and on knowledge gathered across many encounters. The brain learns the stable qualities that make one voice different from another, while also allowing for changes caused by distance, emotion, age, or the room in which the voice is heard. A remembered voice may not return as a complete sound recording. Often, only its rhythm or emotional tone is available. The exact words are gone, but the manner of speaking remains. One can remember that a sentence was spoken gently without recalling the sentence itself. Objects can also become powerful cues through long familiarity. A smooth wooden handle shaped by years of use, a small mark on a ceramic bowl, or the weight of a well-worn book may carry layers of repeated experience. The object becomes connected not only with one event, but with an entire pattern of ordinary life. Recognition may begin through touch. The hand encounters a familiar texture, and the object feels known before it is fully seen. Tactile memory contributes to the sense that certain materials belong to a particular place or routine. The rough weave of a blanket, the cool surface of a stone windowsill, or the polished edge of a desk can quietly restore the setting in which it was once often touched. These cues are powerful, partly because they are specific. A general request to remember the past offers the mind few directions. A particular scent, rhythm, texture, or tone activates a more precise set of associations. From one surviving detail, a wider scene can begin to assemble. Sometimes the memory arrives immediately. At other times, the cue produces only a nameless familiarity. The scent is known, but the place remains hidden. The voice seems close, but no face appears. Hours later, another association may complete the path, and the source becomes clear. This delayed return shows how memory can continue working beyond deliberate search. Activation may spread quietly through related networks until enough of the pattern has gathered for conscious recollection. What first felt like a vague echo becomes a room, a season, or an ordinary afternoon. The world is filled with such echoes. They wait in the scent released from folded cloth, in the first notes of an old melody, in the grain of a wooden surface, and in the cadence of a voice heard from a nearby room. None of them preserves the past by itself. Each offers only a small beginning, but sometimes a small beginning is enough. A scent rises, a sound repeats, or a familiar object rests in the hand. The present touches one surviving thread, and the mind follows it gently backward, gathering place, feeling, and time, until an earlier world becomes briefly close again. The earliest years of life are filled with learning, yet most adults can remember very little from them. A child learns familiar voices, the shape of home, the rhythm of daily care, the meaning of many words, and the movements needed to walk through the world. These changes are profound, but they rarely survive as clear personal scenes that can later be deliberately revisited. This absence is often called childhood amnesia or infantile amnesia. It refers to the ordinary difficulty adults have in recalling events from the first few years of life. Most people have only scattered memories from early childhood, and the memories that seem earliest are often brief, uncertain, or shaped by stories heard later. The lack of clear recollection does not mean that young children are unable to form memories. Even very young infants can learn patterns, recognize familiar sounds, respond differently to people they know, and remember simple associations for a period of time. Memory is active from the beginning, but the systems needed for lasting autobiographical memory are still developing. Autobiographical memory is more than the ability to recognize something familiar. It includes the sense that an event happened to oneself, in a particular place and at a particular time. To create this kind of memory, the brain must connect many elements: perception, language, emotion, spatial context, sequence, and an emerging understanding of the self. Several of these abilities develop gradually. The hippocampus and its connections continue maturing through childhood. Brain networks involved in organizing experience, directing attention, and constructing coherent personal narratives also change over many years. Early memories are therefore formed within a system that is still becoming capable of preserving and later reconstructing complex events. Language may be especially important. Before children can describe an experience, they can still remember aspects of it. But language provides a structure through which events can be organized, rehearsed, and shared. Words help mark who was present, what happened first, where the event took place, and why it mattered. When adults speak with children about the past, they help shape this structure. A quiet conversation about a visit to a pond might include the ducks near the reeds, the bread carried in a small bag, and the rain that began on the walk home. Through such conversations, the child learns that an experience can be arranged into a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Different families and cultures speak about personal memories in different ways. Some conversations emphasize detailed individual experiences. Others focus more on shared routines, relationships, or lessons. These patterns can influence how children learn to describe and retain their past, although they are only one part of a much larger developmental process. A sense of self also grows gradually. Very young children experience the world directly, but the ability to think of oneself as a continuous person moving through time becomes more developed with age. Autobiographical memory depends partly on this continuity. An event becomes not merely something that happened, but something that happened to me during an earlier part of my own life. As the child's understanding changes, the way an early event was originally encoded may become difficult for the older mind to access. A toddler may represent an experience through sensations, actions, and simple emotional patterns. Years later, the adult attempts to retrieve it through language and a more developed concept of time. The original memory and the later search may not fit together easily. This is sometimes described as a problem of changing retrieval cues. The early memory may have been formed in a mental world organized differently from the adult one. Even if parts of the experience influence later feelings or knowledge, they may no longer be available as a conscious scene. Early experiences can remain in other forms. A familiar movement may become part of procedural memory. The sound patterns of a language become deeply learned. Repeated routines create expectations about how ordinary events unfold. A place may feel comforting without producing a specific recollection of the first times it was visited. These forms of memory help shape development even when no autobiographical story remains. The mind carries forward knowledge and familiarity from years that cannot be consciously revisited. The past continues through learned patterns, not only through scenes that can be narrated. The few memories that do seem to come from very early childhood are often unusual in their simplicity. There may be a patch of sunlight on a floor, the height of a garden gate, the sound of water in a basin, or the feeling of being carried through a quiet room. Such memories are sometimes called fragments because they lack a full sequence or clear explanation. Their apparent age can also be difficult to establish. People usually date early memories by connecting them with later knowledge. They know which house the family occupied when a younger relative was born, or how old they were when a room was changed. The remembered image itself may not contain an exact sense of time. Family stories can become intertwined with these fragments. A person may have heard many times about standing beneath a flowering tree or dropping a small toy into a stream. Eventually, the event may seem visually familiar. It can be difficult to know whether the image comes from direct memory, repeated description, a photograph seen later, or imagination. This does not mean that early memories are meaningless. Their source may be uncertain while their emotional and personal importance remains genuine. A family story repeated with affection becomes part of one's remembered life, even when it is partly shared rather than entirely recollected. Photographs can have a similar effect. An image of an early birthday may become so familiar that it seems to contain movement, voices, and details beyond the frame. The mind uses later knowledge to imagine the larger scene. Over time, the photograph and the reconstructed memory may become closely joined. Children's memories are also more likely than adults' memories to change as understanding develops. A young child may remember an event clearly for months or years and later lose access to it. Long-term studies suggest that the boundary of childhood amnesia shifts as children grow, with some early memories becoming unavailable during later childhood. The past is not simply waiting in a completed form until adulthood. Memory systems themselves are changing, and the memories formed within them must survive those changes. Some are reorganized into general knowledge. Some are transformed through storytelling. Some lose the cues that once made them accessible. By the time adulthood arrives, the earliest years often remain as a soft region without many distinct scenes. There may be a few isolated images, several stories told by others, and a broad sense of what home once felt like. Around these fragments lies everything that was learned, without later becoming a personal narrative. A person may not remember learning the rhythm of a first language, recognizing the footsteps of familiar people, or discovering that evening follows afternoon. Yet these forms of knowledge became part of the foundation through which later memories were understood. In this way, the forgotten beginning of life is not empty. It is filled with learning that has changed form. Early experience survives in habits, expectations, meanings, and familiar feelings. Even when the moments themselves can no longer be clearly called back, the first years remain quietly present beneath later memory. Not as a complete hidden record, but as patterns woven into the mind before the story of the self had fully learned how to tell itself. Time does not pass through memory at the same steady pace shown by a clock. An hour can feel long while it is happening and brief when remembered later. A week filled with unfamiliar places may seem to contain more time than a month of repeated routines. The brain does not preserve duration as a continuous measurement. Instead, remembered time is reconstructed from change, attention, emotion, and the number of distinct events that remain. Imagine spending an afternoon in a quiet town never visited before. The streets curve unexpectedly. A narrow passage opens onto a small square. Bells sound somewhere beyond the rooftops. A bakery window reflects the pale sky, and a bridge appears at the end of a lane that seemed to lead nowhere. By evening, the afternoon may feel unusually full. Many separate moments have been noticed, and the mind has created several boundaries between one part of the experience and the next. Now imagine an afternoon spent following a deeply familiar routine. The same chair, the same work, the same sounds from the street, and the same sequence of small tasks may pass comfortably. While it is unfolding, the time can feel spacious. Yet later, there may be fewer distinct markers from which to rebuild it. The hours are not missing, but many of them have blended into an established pattern. This difference helps explain why time can seem compressed in memory. Repeated experiences often produce fewer unique traces. One ordinary morning resembles another, and the mind stores much of their shared structure as general knowledge. When looking back, there may be only a few details that separate one day from the next. The period therefore feels shorter than it truly was. Novel experiences often have the opposite effect. They require closer attention because the mind cannot rely as fully on familiar expectations. New sights, routes, voices, and arrangements create more individual memories. Looking back, a person finds many points along the way, and the period seems wider. This does not mean novelty always makes time feel slow in the moment. Sometimes, an engaging new experience passes quickly because attention is absorbed. Later, however, it may seem long because so much was encoded. Psychologists often distinguish between prospective judgments of time, made while a period is unfolding, and retrospective judgments, made afterward from memory. The two can lead to very different impressions. While waiting quietly for something expected, a person may pay close attention to time itself. Each minute becomes noticeable, and the interval can feel long. Yet afterward, the period may leave little memory beyond the waiting. By contrast, an afternoon of varied activity may seem to pass quickly, but when recalled, it contains many scenes and therefore feels extended. Memory estimates duration, partly by counting change. The mind notices shifts in place, activity, conversation, light, and internal state. A day that includes a morning walk, a train journey, a new room, an evening meal, and rain after sunset has many natural divisions. Each boundary helps organize experience into separate episodes. Researchers sometimes call these divisions event boundaries. They occur when one meaningful activity ends and another begins, or when the surrounding situation changes. Walking through a doorway, beginning a new conversation, or watching daylight fade can signal that one event has become another. These boundaries help memory because they give experience structure. Details within the same event are often connected more strongly with one another than with details across a boundary. A sentence spoken before leaving a room may feel more distant from a sentence spoken moments later in the garden. Even though little clock time has passed, the brain is constantly predicting what will happen next. In familiar situations, these predictions are usually smooth. When a pattern changes, the mind updates its understanding of the current event. This update can create a boundary and make the new moment more distinct in memory. A quiet evening can contain many such changes. The last light disappears from the window. A lamp is turned on. The sound of traffic lessens. A book is closed and water begins to warm in another room. Each change marks a transition, gently dividing the evening into parts. Yet memory does not preserve all boundaries equally. Some become clear because they carried meaning. Others disappear because the transition was too familiar to notice. Looking back, the mind reconstructs the flow of time from the boundaries that remain. Emotion can also alter remembered duration. A peaceful gathering may seem brief while it is happening, because attention rests naturally on the people and conversation. Later, it may feel expansive if many warm details remain. A quiet, solitary hour may seem long in the moment and short in memory if little changed. The beginning and end of an experience often receive special emphasis. The first moments of entering a new place may be remembered clearly because the mind is building an initial model of the surroundings. The final moments may also stand out because they provide closure. The middle can become less distinct, especially when it contains repetition. This pattern appears in journeys, conversations, seasons, and entire periods of life. The first days in a new home may be filled with detail, the unfamiliar sound of pipes, the direction of afternoon light. The first meal eaten near a window. Months later, daily routines become smoother, and many days blend together. The beginning seems long and richly divided, while the later period appears to move more quickly. As years pass, familiar routines occupy a larger part of life, and this may contribute to the common feeling that time moves faster with age. Researchers have proposed several explanations, including changes in attention, novelty, and the way life periods are organized in autobiographical memory. No single theory explains the experience completely, but memory clearly plays an important role. Childhood often seems large in retrospect because it contains so many first encounters. Seasons bring new activities. Places are still becoming familiar. Words, customs, and ordinary objects are continually gaining meaning. Later, life may include fewer entirely new categories of experience, even when each day remains full in other ways. But remembered time is not determined only by age. A period of learning, travel, creative work, or changing routines can feel spacious at any stage of life because it creates new distinctions. The mind records not simply how long something lasted, but how much change and meaning it contained. Memory also rearranges the distance between events. Two moments separated by years may feel close because they share the same scent, song, or season. Events from the same month may feel far apart if life changed greatly between them. Psychological distance is shaped by similarity and transformation rather than by calendar time alone. A familiar melody heard after decades can briefly fold the years together. The present room remains visible, yet another room seems close behind it. The mind does not travel backward in a literal sense. It brings an earlier pattern into the present, reducing the felt distance between then and now. Other memories grow distant, even when they are more recent. A routine from a previous home may feel as though it belonged to another era because the surroundings, relationships, and daily structure have changed. The number of changes between the event and the present makes the interval feel wide. In this way, memory creates its own geography of time. Some years are compressed into a few general impressions. A single afternoon remains broad and detailed. Distant moments touch through resemblance, while neighboring weeks drift apart through change. The clock continues evenly, but remembered life is shaped by landmarks rather than equal units. A doorway, a first snowfall, a new voice, the end of a season, or the beginning of a routine becomes a marker along the way. And when the mind looks back, it moves between these markers, rebuilding duration from what remains. Time becomes long where memory is rich with distinction, and brief where many moments have gently merged. The past is not arranged as an unbroken line, but as a quiet landscape of clearings, pathways, and distances that change according to the way they are remembered. As years pass, memory changes in ways that are often quieter and more varied than they first appear. Some names may take longer to arrive. A recent conversation may require a little more searching, yet knowledge gathered across decades can remain rich, and familiar skills may continue with remarkable steadiness. Memory does not simply grow weaker in one uniform direction. Different forms of remembering follow different paths. Consider someone returning to a village, visited many times over a lifetime. The name of a newly opened shop may be difficult to recall, while the older shape of the streets remains effortless. The person remembers where the road narrows, which lane catches the morning sun, and where the sound of water can be heard behind the houses. New details may take longer to settle, but the larger map has become deeply established. This contrast reflects a broad pattern found in research on memory and aging. Learning unfamiliar information can gradually become less rapid, especially when many details must be held in awareness at once or when attention is divided. Retrieval may also become slower. A word can feel available without appearing immediately, and a name may return only after the conversation has moved on. Slower retrieval is not the same as complete loss. Often, the information is still present within the wider network of knowledge, but the path toward it is less direct. The mind may reach a related word first. or several possible names may compete. A few minutes later, the correct one appears quietly, as though it had been approaching from a distance. This is especially common with proper names. Names often have fewer meaningful connections than ordinary words. The word river is linked with movement, water, landscape, sound, and many personal experiences. A person's name may be connected mainly with that individual. If the direct route toward it is temporarily unavailable, there may be fewer alternative paths. General knowledge, by contrast, can remain strong for many years. Vocabulary may continue to grow well into later adulthood. Understanding of familiar subjects can become broader and more connected. A person who has spent decades tending plants may recognize subtle signs of changing weather or soil condition without needing to explain every observation separately. This kind of accumulated understanding is sometimes called crystallized knowledge. It includes words, meanings, facts, and skills strengthened through long experience. It is not frozen or unchanging despite the name. It continues to develop whenever new information joins an existing structure. When knowledge is well organized, one idea supports another. A single detail can awaken an entire network. The smell of leaves after a warm day may suggest a season, the condition of the garden, and the kind of night likely to follow. Years of experience have created relationships that make understanding efficient. Familiar routines also benefit from long practice. Preparing a well-known meal, caring for a household object, playing a practice piece of music, or following a route used for years may require little conscious effort. Procedural memory and deeply learned habits can remain resilient because they are supported by repeated patterns across many occasions. Personal memories, however, may gradually change in texture. An event from long ago can remain meaningful while losing some of its exact detail. The broad setting survives, along with the people involved and the feeling of the occasion. But the precise order of small actions becomes uncertain. This is not unique to older memory. All autobiographical memories transform over time. But as the years between an event and the present increase, there are more opportunities for retelling, reinterpretation, and overlap with similar experiences. A particular spring morning may slowly become connected with many other spring mornings. Older memories are sometimes remembered more through their meaning than through their surface details. A person may not recall the exact words spoken during an early day at work, yet may remember the feeling of beginning something new. The event remains as part of a life story, carrying significance even after much of its sensory texture has softened. People also differ greatly from one another. Age alone cannot predict how a particular person will remember. Health, sleep, attention, education, interests, social activity, daily routine, and simple individual variation all influence memory. Even within one person, some days bring easy recall while others feel slower. The mind may also become more selective about what deserves attention. Information that seems useful, meaningful, or emotionally important can be remembered more readily than details without clear purpose. This selectivity is not necessarily a decline. It may reflect a lifetime of learning what tends to matter. A long list of unrelated items can be difficult to hold, while a story about familiar people may remain clear. A new piece of technology may feel confusing until its functions are connected with known routines. Once meaning is established, learning often becomes easier because the information has somewhere to belong. Older adults may also rely more on general patterns when reconstructing events. This can support understanding, though it may sometimes make the source of a detail less precise. A person remembers the substance of a conversation, but may be unsure whether it happened on Monday or Tuesday. The meaning is stable while the surrounding label has faded. Such changes reveal again that memory is not one ability. Remembering a date, recognizing a face, knowing a word, following a recipe, and recalling a childhood room depend on partly different processes. One may become slower while another remains steady. There's also evidence that emotional balance can shape later life memory. Many older adults show a tendency to give greater attention to positive or meaningful information, though this pattern varies and is influenced by circumstances. A gentle conversation, a family tradition, or a familiar view may hold more lasting importance than a collection of neutral details. As a result, the remembered past may become organized around what carried value. Some uneventful periods compress, while moments of connection remain distinct. A shared meal, a long friendship, or the first signs of a returning season may continue to glow even when dates and sequences are uncertain. Memory in later years is therefore not simply a shelf from which objects are gradually removed. It is a changing landscape shaped by long use. Some paths become faint, others become broad through repetition. New routes may take longer to form, but older ones can leap through wide territories of knowledge. A well-known voice may still be recognized after only a few words. Hands may remember the movement of a familiar craft. A proverb heard decades ago may appear at the fitting moment. The name of a recently encountered person may remain hidden, while the meaning of a lifetime's experience stays readily available. The mind continues to learn, connect, and revise. New memories join older structures, sometimes slowly, and sometimes with surprising ease. What has been practiced remains supported. What has been meaningful often finds many routes back. And as time gathers, memory may become less concerned with preserving every passing detail and more shaped by relationships, patterns, and significance. The exact hour fades, but the season remains. The wording disappears, but the kindness is remembered. A road changes, yet the sense of where it leads can stay quietly certain. As the room grows quieter, the day begins to loosen its hold. Recent moments no longer need to remain at the front of awareness. A sentence heard in the afternoon, the pattern of light on a wall, the sound of a door closing somewhere nearby. All of it can begin to settle into the wider movement of memory. Some details may remain. Some may blend with earlier days. Others may fade so completely that their passing leaves no clear trace. This is not a mistake in the design of the mind. Memory was never meant to preserve every moment with equal sharpness. It carries forward what becomes connected, repeated, meaningful, useful, or emotionally significant. It allows countless smaller impressions to soften, making space for new experience to arrive. The past therefore remains with us in many forms. Some memories return as clear events, with a place, a sequence, and a sense of being there again. Others survive as knowledge, no longer attached to the occasion when they were learned. Some remain in the body, in movements that have become familiar through practice. And some exist only as a quiet feeling that a voice, room, or melody has been known before. Together, These forms of memory help create continuity. The person waking tomorrow will not be entirely new. Familiar words will still carry meaning. Known rooms will still feel recognizable. Skills practiced over many days will still guide ordinary movements. The mind will bring expectations from the past into the next morning, allowing the world to feel stable enough to understand. Yet identity is not formed by memory alone, nor does it depend on recalling every chapter of life. Much of what shapes a person cannot be deliberately brought to mind. Early learning, forgotten routines, repeated acts of care, and experiences that have become general understanding may influence the present without appearing as distinct scenes. A person may not remember every conversation that taught patience, every evening that created a sense of home, or every quiet example from which trust was learned. Still, these experiences can become part of how the world is approached. They remain in patterns of attention, expectation, language, and feeling. The memories that do return are continually interpreted from the present. An old room is remembered by the mind that exists now, not by the exact mind that first entered it. Later knowledge changes what seems important. A small kindness once barely noticed may become central. A routine that once felt ordinary may later represent steadiness. The meaning of a memory can deepen even as some of its details fade. In this way, remembering allows different versions of the self to meet. The present mind looks back toward earlier thoughts, hopes, and understandings. It may recognize what has remained and what has changed. The connection is never complete, because the earlier moment cannot be restored exactly, but enough can return to create a sense of continuity across time. Imagination also helps form this continuity. The same systems that rebuild the past help the mind picture what has not yet happened. Memories of known places, people, and possibilities provide materials for imagining tomorrow. A future journey may be assembled from earlier landscapes. A hoped-for conversation may borrow the tone of voices already familiar. The mind uses the remembered world to create possibilities beyond it. Remembering and imagining are therefore close companions. Both gather pieces into scenes. Both depend on knowledge, context, and meaning. The difference is not that one is perfectly real and the other entirely invented, but that they point in different directions. One reaches toward what has happened, the other reaches toward what might happen. Between them lies the present, where both processes quietly occur. At night, this present can become simpler. The tasks of the day no longer need to be held so tightly. Working memory can release unfinished fragments for a while. Attention no longer has to follow every sound or organize every next step. The mind can move through looser associations, allowing recent experience to settle beside older knowledge. During sleep, some memories may strengthen. Some may be reorganized. Some details may become less accessible, while broader meaning becomes clearer. There is no conscious librarian choosing what will remain. The process unfolds through changing patterns of brain activity, shaped by attention, emotion, repetition, existing knowledge, and the many rhythms of sleep. By morning, the day just ended will already be slightly transformed. Perhaps a new idea will feel more familiar. Perhaps the order of small events will be less exact. Perhaps an ordinary moment will survive unexpectedly. The sound of rain beginning, the weight of a book in the hand, or a brief patch of amber light across the floor. Other parts of the day will be gone from easy reach. They may have been too faint, too similar to other moments, or simply unnecessary to preserve. Their fading will make room for what comes next. This balance between keeping and releasing continues throughout life. Memory gives the present depth, but forgetting keeps it open. Without memory, each moment would arrive without context. Without forgetting, the mind might remain crowded with detail, unable to move gently toward anything new. The past is therefore carried selectively. It is not stored as a complete hidden world. It survives as changing patterns, distributed across knowledge, sensation, skill, emotion, and story. Some parts return easily. Others wait for a fitting cue. Some are altered through retelling. Some dissolve into the background from which familiar understanding grows. A life remembered is not an exact copy of a life lived. It is a quieter composition, shaped from what remained available and what continued to matter. Certain years compress into a few scenes. A single afternoon may stay spacious for decades. Distant moments touch because they share a scent, a melody, or a season. Events close together drift apart because the person remembering them has changed. And still, through all this movement, there is continuity enough. The mind carries forward names, places, meanings, practice motions, emotional patterns, and countless subtle expectations. It holds the past lightly enough to change and firmly enough to provide a sense of home within time. Now the day can become part of that larger landscape. It does not need to be reviewed or preserved in full. Whatever the mind is ready to keep can settle quietly. Whatever it no longer needs can begin to fade. The room remains still. Sounds grow softer and more distant. Recent thoughts loosen from one another, no longer required to form a clear sequence. Somewhere beneath awareness, memory continues its calm work, connecting, simplifying, strengthening, and releasing. The past is not disappearing, it is changing into the forms through which it can travel forward. And as the present grows quiet, the mind carries what it can, lets go of what it may, and gently makes room for sleep.